Hello?
Yeah.
Did we start?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, you're so casual.
Yeah. Well, turning over a new leaf.
Yeah, you just, look at you. Just relaxed, casual.
My
happy.
goal is to start every single podcast with the same thing. So when I say hello.
Yes, I know. Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm sure that won't get annoying.
I think that's why we don't have as many listeners.
You
Although
hit
if you are a
10,000 listens.
10,000 listens. Yeah. Lifetime
That's exciting.
listens.
You got a congratulations email.
I did.
From the podcasting gods.
I don't really know what that means.
I mean, we listened to it 7,000 times. Anyway.
Yeah. Somebody actually asked me how many listeners there are. I think there's like a couple, like 200 it projects. It's tough to kind of tell. And then I always wonder who those 200 are. If it's just, like, I wonder how they, they're, I don't know. Whatever.
Anyway.
I don't care.
Don't care.
No.
Well, today we are going to talk about something I think is probably one of the more important topics that we've discussed. Personal and very important to you, but I think the reason, as we've said with all these podcasts, is just how it can be impactful for other people. So
Yeah.
in you sharing your experience and your story about it, so the other day you put up a post on Instagram, a letter to your alcohol.
Yeah.
So for people that haven't seen that, what was that post?
It was a letter I wrote to alcohol on the 1 year of being sober. And I actually didn't view my decision to stop drinking as
Sobriety.
stepping to sobriety. Yeah, I just didn't really.
What did you view it as? So you, last February 14th of 2019, you had already stopped drinking, but it was Valentine's Day, you had a glass of wine. But that was the last day you drank.
I stopped drinking, I think, at the end of January. And then, or beginning of February, and then it was Valentine's Day, and I think we had like a nice bottle of wine or something.
But what was the decision? When you decided, you kind of said, like, I remember when you said it, like, gonna try to not drink. I don't think you set out though for like this 1 year. It started like, I wonder how long I can go. I wonder what it would be like to stop drinking, and then it turned into kind of a year, and now it's like, I'm not sure I'm ever gonna drink again.
Yeah, I didn't start off on it. I think that I had the idea, like, okay, so one of my first level one, actually, working for, like, on a level one staff, Pat Barber, we were talking, he was there, and he was saying he stopped drinking for like a year to see, just to see about it. And he's got this crazy thing where he actually, like, doesn't get hungover.
Yeah, I remember you saying
Yeah, it's crazy. But nonetheless, he was just like, yeah, it was like whatever. And I was like, oh, like that's cool. Like, you know, doing a full year.
Yeah.
Like, there's some other people that I knew that would do like 6 months on, 6 months off kind of thing, and you know, that's fine or whatever. But I didn't start off on it really with any goal of a challenge, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't quite sure what the intent of it was gonna. I shouldn't say that. I wasn't sure what the, like, finish point of it, so to speak, was gonna be. I just knew that I needed to stop drinking.
Right. I mean, and I would almost say, like, we'll take sugar for example. For someone that has for someone with a healthy relationship with sugar, I don't know that it would ever occur to them to say, I'm going to take a year off of eating sugar. So do you think that inherent in saying you're going to stop doing something, you recognize there's a problem with it, your relationship?
I've known for a very long time I've had a problem with it.
Right. So what made you decide at that point that you needed to stop
Um,
because there wasn't some you've had and I've experienced with you some real low points with alcohol, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like I could see something happening, hitting like a rock bottom, and then saying like, "Wow, I have to stop drinking." That didn't really happen.
Well,
Recent to that decision.
no. There's a couple things. One, I didn't want to. I didn't want to be drunk in a position where I wasn't. I'm not sure how the outcome would go in terms of like my life.
What does that really mean? That sounds like
Yeah,
so. Like at that point,
I didn't want to
last
get drunk
year-
and kill myself.
Okay.
That's basically what it means. Like I wanted to remove an environmental from my life because at that point and for the past couple of years and whatever, there have been ideations. There's been moments where, yep, like booze has been part of it, and that's like not something I want to do. And so, I think it's really tough to say that. It is tough to say that, but you know, that's just what it is, frankly. And
Recognizing
yeah, like
there was a
recognizing.
lot you didn't have. I don't want to say you didn't have control over.
Yeah.
2019 was as we've talked about recently for you, was a challenging year. I think there were some high points.
Yeah.
But it was, I think, this year that like kind of brought a lot to your attention. Like finally brought some things to the surface, and it kind of escalated actually over the course of the year. But for you, deciding that now looking back, that decision to control the one thing, like something you could, was probably the best thing you could have done at that time because it did end in a place that was a little bit of a rock bottom for you that really was, I think, a positive in the end.
Yeah.
But had alcohol still been part of your life, that would have probably gone very differently.
Yeah. And I think that, you said some things came to the surface, and sure, but I think that I also fucking nosedived and went deep. Like, that was the thing, too. So I am a firm believer of going within yourself. And
you mean over the course of the year?
Yeah, over the course of the year, over the course of 2 years, kind of
Do you think alcohol would be a distraction from being able to do that?
100%. 100%.
So, like for you, because I think there's, like I would never look at your art, like, I mean, the time we've been together.
Yeah.
And I think people have a stigma on like what that looks like to have a problem, a quote unquote problem with alcohol. So probably in the entire time we've been together, there's maybe been 2 instances that were like bad alcohol related incidences. Like, and I mean, I saw you in a like position. I like you were a very different person.
Yeah.
That's not to say that something happened that was like,
yeah,
you weren't abusive or nothing like that.
Right.
And
But
I don't think that's, and for a lot of people, like if you ask most couples, like they've seen their spouse intoxicated.
Drunk and whatever. Yeah.
But I'm not, that doesn't mean that when, I was very aware though that you had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol.
Well, some of the shit that you didn't see was also some of the bad stuff.
Sure, when you lived down on base.
Yeah.
But the thing is about that is like I wasn't completely unaware of that. I just wasn't fully exposed to it. But it was very clear to me, you stopping, and the fact that you were unable to not, like, part of your coping mechanism was stopping and getting a 6-pack. And
yeah, for sure.
Or however many, or drinking, whatever.
You know what it really would be? It would be having a couple, when my team was deployed and I wasn't, which really fucking gutted me. And I didn't because personal stuff with us, and I was getting out, and if I deployed, there's a high chance I probably would have re-enlisted on deployment also, because I would have got a nice fat check, tax-free, cash, and been like, right on. Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff going on. I was basically isolated on my own, without a purpose, just sitting in...
With no life. I mean, really, because on the week, like,
no life.
Other than
I was down in
job.
Clarksville. Yeah, but my team's gone.
Sure.
The company there's a couple teams training, like, I wasn't doing really much. Sure, I would jump. I remember saying to you the one time, like, I need to jump out of an airplane because I need to do something. And so the last, maybe 6 months was that? Yeah, it was just like once they left, and then Nate left. Once Nate left, I think it got bad.
So you would
So I would have a beer or two in the team room, just like
by yourself.
no, not always by myself, but then I'd have a beer or two. I'd have a beer on the ride home from base.
Right.
So I'd leave base. I was living in a house in a situation that was not ideal, trying to save money, send everything back home kind of deal, and just, pay as little rent as possible. So that wasn't great. So I'd have a beer on the ride home, usually, and then I'd stop and get like a 6-pack or a few like big Foster's cans, and and then just pretty much drink the rest of the night.
Right, and so I think that's.
And it was masking and covering up things that I really needed to face, but I also felt really numb, and I was drinking to feel something. And that was, that's a problem. That's an issue. And for me, the problem was like really, you're, I think about it like, so you're, what's wrong with you? You're gonna drink, and I wasn't drunk. Like there would have been no way.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, 8 beers. Some might say, my point in this is some might be like, well, it's not like you blacked out.
No.
And that's the thing is like, well, that doesn't have to be the problem. The problem doesn't, having a poor relationship with alcohol and it being unhealthy doesn't mean.
But why would I need to drink a beer on the ride home?
Well, right. I mean, that's.
Like what's wrong? What is wrong with you? You know what I mean?
I mean, that doesn't occur to most people. Like, I would never.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's just because that's not what you're supposed to, like, that's just not good, So, anyway, so I wrote this letter, Dear Alcohol, as a way to, I think that it's a powerful experience to write a letter. I've had some clients do it, and it's very, very real. And so I was wondering, what the 1 year thing. Oh, well, say what you will about like anniversaries or milestones, but like I'm going to celebrate that. But I was wanting to bring some awareness and some closure to this issue. And so that exercise of writing a letter to either yourself or to something that really has been a major influence in your life is a very powerful thing to do. So I wrote it, and it felt good, for sure. It's always a bit nerve-wracking when you put something out into the world of social media, because people judge the shit out of you. That's just how it goes. And then people are also, though, inspired by it. And so I've had multiple Green Berets reach out to me and tell me how important that was. Some have taken sobriety into their own hands now, and there's quite a few people who have decided to stop drinking because that was what they needed. And that's not me doing anything other than saying, like, look,
being honest, putting it out there.
Yeah, like, this is something I struggle with, and this was the deal. And I think the big thing about the letter is it was always me. Like, I was always the problem. And so, getting back to your question about like what made me stop drinking, I knew I had a problem for a long time, but I also knew it was only a matter of time before something very tragic happened that had alcohol in the picture.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that once alcohol was removed, all the problems went away.
Sure.
That's not it, because alcohol wasn't the fucking problem.
Right.
I was the problem, and I continue to be in everything, like, in just normal things. And so I wanted to remove something that could be a scapegoat. I wanted to remove something at a point in time too where, like, and we had drank a lot. Like, we drank quite a bit before, especially when I first got out. And I love making, and I'll still make cocktails for people. Like, I'm looking at a couple nice bottles of booze right now, and I enjoy that. Like, I enjoy making a cocktail for people. I think it's just like making a good cup of coffee or food or whatever, and that's fine.
But yeah, I mean, when you got out, we did a fair amount of drinking,
Yeah.
and I am not a big, like, since
You were
you
never
stopped.
a drinker.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really been a drinker. Since you stopped drinking, I haven't drank much at all, just because it's just not really part of our.
Yeah, and I don't care if you drink.
No, I know. I'm just saying that's not part of our. Like, whatever. I'm not a big drinker.
No.
However, I do think it's interesting for people. Yes, like, you're the problem. I get what you're saying about that.
Yeah.
But yes, alcohol changes people
Yes.
and brings out, no, maybe not changes them. Some people are silly.
Yeah.
Some people are whatever. And for you, I think what alcohol did, which it's not good, but in some ways it's like if you were just a silly drunk,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a lot easier to just not really see alcohol as a problem. But you weren't. You kind of, I feel like it brought out like all the darkness when you would drink.
Yeah,
and I do know.
And I would plunge further into it. Like,
yeah,
that's
and it would
thing.
be just impossible to, so when people are having, as people do in their life, struggling with just normal life things, then you add that to it, and now you have conflict that's very hard to separate what's real and what's the alcohol.
Yeah.
And what's being now said because the alcoholism, it makes things much more complicated, and I think that's another thing I'm sure for some of the people that reached out to you, like, it's not just a you problem, it's a it extends to like the spouse and to the family, and so I think start looking at that and removing that from the situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shit that I needed to, need to, and will continue to need to work through and address. And I've never known how to drink responsibly.
So do you think, so here's a question. Do you, I mean, obviously there is like a genetic predisposition, to alcoholism.
Yeah.
Do you feel that that's what it is? Like, what made you, or do you feel like, and that's kind of how you just were introduced to alcohol at a young age, and like you just never had a responsible relationship with it, or do you feel like you always used it for a numbing agent?
I don't think I always used it for a numbing agent. No, I don't think I always used it for a numbing agent. And in fact, I think recently, I don't know if it has been numbing. I think it's been the opposite of wanting to feel something. Because, there's a lot of, if I were to get a buzz or get drunk or whatever, at least I would feel sort of something.
Okay. So, do you think
I think more of an escapism, you know what I mean? So I think the genetic thing is certainly something to look at, and that's, certainly there. I think that...
But you said you never had a good relationship.
Yeah, so essentially it was never just have a beer or two, maybe I just don't remember ever having, I would drink and not know how to stop. And I'm kind of an addict in that regard. I don't know how to do much in moderation. I know that's sort of a throwaway thing now.
But we used to, when I would come down on weekends, it wasn't we would have 2 or 3 drinks. It wasn't like you were then stopping and buying a bottle of vodka.
No.
I mean,
and that was because you know why? Yeah, because you know why? Because I was in one of the most intense periods of my life. And everything I did from the second I enlisted and took an oath of enlistment into the Army until until the moment I received my brain, crossed the stage, something was incomplete. There was no have fun on the weekend type thing.
So you felt like your responsibility overrode that.
Right. The purpose, when I talk about what do you want, or how do you want to be, or who are you, and what are your things that you're going to engage in and pursue and step into the unknown as expressions and chances to display who you are. For me at that point, it was the path to becoming a Green Beret. That kept me in check.
Yeah.
Because I also know, if I'm drinking a lot on the weekends, I'm not sleeping, I'm not recovering, I'm not, and so it was pretty binary for me. Everything I did pretty much was intended for one singular purpose, and that was to be the very best I could every single day, because the path that I wanted to do and the goals I wanted to accomplish would demand and require that. And not everybody did that. But that was me.
But so that there was a checks and balances.
Yeah.
But more so than when you got out, the problem, you see that as kind of like if there was a pinnacle of like the problem with your relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, so the long-standing, the undercurrent, when I was in, let's just say, when I was in, we'll just say the Q course, because that's probably when I was most responsible with drinking. I really didn't drink at all. Maybe on the weekend, if you weren't coming down, I wouldn't really drink. Definitely didn't drink during the week. Maybe a beer or two on the weekend, but like there's no way I was coming through the gate with alcohol in my breath if we went out to like El Cabs or something. Like, no, I'm just fucking not doing it. And I never understood people that like could just party and have fun. And they still, a bunch of them still became Grim Braves, graduated, good dudes. I like them. I just, that for me, I was just like, no, I'm not gonna, that's not, I'm not here to make party memories. I'm here for a mission. So, the undercurrent, though, of a problem with alcohol was still there. I was very good at avoiding it. It was able to be repressed. But the problem with when you repress things is that you don't actually solve them. And so I was able to outrun alcohol, essentially, in that point in time. The culture of drinking in the Army, I'm not going to hang my hat on that. Yes, it's there in the military, it's whatever, but like, no, I'm not going to say that was a contributor. Again, that's like pointing it for others. When I was in college, I definitely didn't know how to drink. It was always just drink to get fucked up kind of deal. It was like just partying and all of that. And the problem with it was like, it was this pseudo elation. It was kind of fake. And so when I got out, there was a little bit of the celebratory stuff. And then very, very quickly, there was also, like, what am I doing in life kind of deal? What did I do? What am I going to do? There was a bunch of stuff that I still, work through and, had to work through and stuff. And, drinking kind of was an escape from that, in a way.
Okay, so, but you're saying it didn't really do a numbing job of that. It was like an escape, like you didn't think about that stuff when you drink, or because then when there's like conflict, and that gets into a whole other thing of like if we get into an argument, we've had a discussion about this, like I feel a lot of things if we're talking about interoception, and you've said like you don't. So you're saying like drinking, at least you feel something. More anger.
Yeah.
Like, but at least there's anger. There's something.
At least there's something. Yep.
Which you can see that causing problems
of course.
In a relationship or life or.
Yeah. And then thinking like I just need to have a little bit more, need to feel something, and even physically like needing to feel whatever that high kind of is. So,
but when you say like removing it from the equation of as it relates to suicide, I mean, what's that? I mean, that's a different feeling. Like,
yeah.
What would that? Because you feel like you could get to a place of being that drunk.
Well, look, I mean, yeah, you sacrifice. You sacrifice a certain amount of just proper decision making, and why do people drink and drive? Yeah. And it's the same sort of thing. And so you're obviously like in a spot where you do things and you're like, what the fuck was I doing? What was I thinking? It's like you weren't.
Right.
You also, for me, the alcohol also kind of puts a cloak on who you really are and makes you, it doesn't make you, you obviously make yourself, but it facilitates this other entity of who you are.
Like an alter ego.
Like an alter ego, yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, for some of that, then the whispers in the head become louder. And then it becomes shouting. And then, what do you do? I don't want to hear that shit anymore. And so, that's like where it's a very slippery slope to go down with. And so I had that experience.
Did you have one experience that you, not, I don't mean came close to that edge, but
Yeah.
that was,
Yeah, I forget where you were away, kids were with Eric, and it was just me. And yeah, it was not a good night.
so for other people, I mean, it can seem, I can imagine, I can't imagine, but the thought of like, okay, never drinking again, like what is the biggest challenge? What is that for you? I mean, I know you've said like, yeah, like what's the challenge? What's the biggest thing to overcome or the obstacle with that?
I don't know. I don't see one right now because it's such a pure, authentic reason that I've connected to within myself.
But don't you feel like that's so? Last year, before you made that decision, you had coffee with someone I actually went to high school with.
Yeah, I want to definitely
Andrew
talk about that.
Missioner, who started something called the Alcoholic Next Door. He had a really tumultuous relationship with alcohol since I can remember him in high school, and one of the things he said to you was like pretty impactful.
Yeah.
So what was that?
So we got coffee. Late January or whatever January, it doesn't matter when. And we were talking, and something came up, and he said that somebody asked him, and he's been sober for maybe a decade now, I'm not sure, long time. And he said that they asked him like, "Do you miss it?" Like one of his buddies or whatever, like, "Man, do you miss it?" And and he smiled in retelling me, he smiled and said, "Why would I miss something that exponentially made my life better?"
No, that exponentially made my life worse. Why would I miss
something that when I removed it exponentially made my life better? And I was like, huh. It was the first time, and I know people that have, that are in AA, that aren't in AA, that are battling with sobriety, this and that, the other. And I'll be honest with you, man, like sometimes it's like a badge of honor that I don't quite like. That's why I never said I was gonna be sober, because I just didn't want to have that weird sort of labeling specific status thing. Yeah. Like it was just like, I just didn't want to really touch that. And so it was the first time that I had in person experienced somebody put it that way, and the look on his face and the energy that he emitted when he said that was, I mean, pure is the word that comes to mind. It was so pure, and it was so authentic, and it was so damn powerful. And I was like thinking to myself, wow, what a strong thing to say, versus, yeah, it sucks, I was in Cancun and everybody's partying, and because frankly, like a lot of the pity party stuff and a lot of the woe is me, like I don't want to play that game. I don't want to play that game. I don't want to be that person. It's like, you are making this decision. If it's that bad, then go back to it. But like either commit to it, like own something. Yeah. And Andrew owned it with such strength and positivity and grace, and like it was a really beautiful thing, and that really, really touched me and got me thinking, and really actually that's what started the thought of,
why am I still drinking?
I think I should look into this a bit more.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, framing it in conversation and choice, like, why, what's the intent behind it? It's not just about a 30-day challenge or 1 year, can I do it, and this thing about depriving yourself, or like it's the, to your point, the more positive thing, like the absence of it
Yeah.
is so powerful that, you know, and I know we've had this conversation about like some of the hang-ups where people get hung up with alcohol, I think. And for myself as like a person that doesn't, I don't think I have a unhealthy relationship with alcohol.
Mm-mm.
So for me, it is interesting to think about, like, you know, for us, like, okay, if we want to go out on a Friday night.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of, like, there's a lot that is wrapped up in alcohol and food.
Of course.
But when we look at, like, if we want to go to have a night out, go to Nadar, does it really matter what the substance is in the glass?
Sure.
And that's like a really weird, like, and I think people have had that experience of when people kind of, whether it's on a diet or drinking or other people really care that much about what is in your glass.
Yeah.
To the point that people fake having a drink.
Yeah.
Like, and that's a whole other thing,
Mm-hmm.
the societal thing. And I would say if you're someone struggling with alcohol and there's people, like, we've had some people in our life we've been kind of honest with, like, okay, you are not drinking anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and it just needs to be, sometimes you might need to be just clear with the person.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say our experience has been any different because we've had club soda and bitters.
No, and that
And if
was,
it was
and so that was one of the things that I kind of put myself through to examine it, is what am I getting out of alcohol in this situation? Like, what is alcohol providing?
Right. So if it's us out.
So if it's
on
us
Friday night.
out or, yeah, right, so us out, why do I want to drink alcohol? It's like, well, that's what you do. You go out, a glass of wine, it's nice, okay. How can you go out and have a nice time that doesn't have the liquid substance of alcohol?
Right.
Is the nice time contingent upon the liquid substance? Is that the linchpin? Well, I sure as fuck hope not. Because otherwise, like, what does that say about our relationship? So it's like, okay, so you want to go out, you want to have a nice time. Can you do that without it? Sure. All right. Well, like, what? So then, what really is it about the alcohol? Well, I want to feel included. I want to have connection. Okay, how can you have connection without it? Well, you can look someone in the eye. You can really listen to what they're saying.
But isn't that back to the behavior piece?
Yes.
Because when you look at the food stuff, it's the same thing. People who are maybe struggle with food, I won't say addiction, but like, do you have to have that burger with a bun and fries?
Yeah. Well,
Could you eat some other, does it matter the what? You know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
and then it's like, okay, so, but then being honest, you have to look at, like, you can't hide when you go down that path of asking the questions. You're either going to realize, and like, that's what I mean for me, like, if I'm honest, like, yeah, really, what it would come down to is like, I like how a margarita tastes. What's funny about that is, like, I could have a non-alcoholic margarita, but I wouldn't because it has too much sugar in it, but I'll have it with the alcohol.
oh my
But it's
God,
like,
you're
then
crazy.
whatever. But like, the point is, for me, there isn't this
Yeah,
deeper
I like
thing,
the
like,
way
I
it
want to
tastes.
get
Like, I like
buzzed
the
or-
way a good bourbon
Yeah.
tastes. Like, I like, give me some blands. I love blands, right? But it's also like, do you
What's
have a
the-
problem
yeah.
with it? Like,
Right.
you know, and you have to be honest with yourself with it.
Mhm.
And I get it, the whole tasting. Good beers, good drinks, like, yeah, for sure. I get it.
Right, and
Is it a
and
problem,
chocolate
though?
chip cookies taste good, but
Yeah.
we don't eat them every
There's
day.
a lot of stuff that tastes good. And
Right.
I'm not trying to be dismissive, but
Yeah.
like, you're not going to hear, and this is me talking to me, but I think a lot of folks could probably benefit
Yeah.
from hearing it. You're not going to hear what you want to fucking hear.
Mhm.
So you open your goddamn ears. And like, well, I like blands. It's nice. Here's a perfect example. We're out there in a nice bar, cold as shit outside, around the holidays. Yes, a couple fingers of blands makes for an amazing atmosphere.
Yeah,
And we're there, and there's a fire going, and the lights are right. And like, yeah, I get it. All the atmospherics. But like, you have a problem. You're the problem. So if you're...
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it? And
Well,
that's
you have
kind
to
of
make
the
that
thing.
choice of which is the priority then. So
Yeah,
for
and it
people
tastes
that,
great.
yeah.
I trust me. And there were some cocktails that I would make that were really damn good. But yeah,
Yeah, I think
for me,
looking at the decision making on the
so looking at that as a thing of like, what is it? Is the experience and how I want to feel solely reliant upon physical alcohol? Can I extract the essence of the experience that I want to have with the absence of alcohol? And I would suggest you can. You 100% can. If you cannot, you have to look at yourself more and that experience and like, well, then what is it sort of that's getting in your way? Because it's not.
And I think that's an exercise for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, when people, not to get sidetracked from this, but just we talk about presence and like, that's an interesting experiment for people.
Yeah.
Like if you really are going out with friends and having a time being present with them, it really should not matter if it's pizza or burgers or wine or club soda.
No. There was a couple times, like when we were out at the Do for Breakthrough, this was a few months in, or when I was, not really when I was out there for the lectures, because there was also like a work kind of thing. But
yeah, it was warm. Like having
a
cold beer.
Oh man, having a cold beer. It was a local brewery, right? So all of the triggers: local brewery, celebratory communal time, amazing place. Everybody's feeling good. There's just this buzz about it that is really awesome, and the energy is super high. I'm like, man, a beer would be great right now. It smells good. It looks good. They're drinking them out of mason jars. Like, yes.
Yeah.
But that's like, it's like, well, what is it? I want to feel included. Well, I still can. Like, I don't want to miss out on it. Well, miss out on what? The experience is not in the glass.
Well, and what, for someone with a problem, like, what are you willing to, so you're willing to have that taste, like, that's what you're choosing over this. And it's like caffeine coffee. Some people who really like caffeine is a problem or like really causing them issues. Like, does the coffee or drinking have to be caffeinated? Could it be decaf, and could you have the same experience? So I guess the other part is like, so you have had people that were really impacted by that.
Yeah.
So what was your decision in like putting that out there publicly?
To raise awareness. That's like the essence of everything I think I do. To raise awareness and to lead. And being a leader sometimes requires doing things that are not easy.
Why do you feel like, you said, being judged and stuff? I mean, why would you feel like, how would that be judged?
Well, it was brought to my attention that in certain circles, it's not really something you publicly talk about. So
being an alcoholic or
being an alcoholic,
having an issue with alcohol.
Yeah, it's
not.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's some sensitivities with that, and that was, I didn't know that. Like I didn't.
Sure, and your experience of someone like Andrew, he's made a public platform, Alcoholic Next Door, and and his thing is a neat, like, by nature of the name, Alcoholic Next Door, and he was the kid in high school that everybody just like, oh, he just gets drunk, and that was just how it was. But the point is, like, he really had a problem with it, and he could have died.
Right.
So there are people that do put it out there publicly. So while some people might be sensitive to it, or there might be certain cultural pockets that don't believe in that. Yeah. I understand that. So there are also people that, like, as your point, if Andrew wasn't a public person and had that conversation with you or whatever, like, you can also help. Being open and honest can impact people as it has.
Yeah, and I don't think you get to turn off. Like, I don't believe in being selective with what you, with your honesty. I think that for whatever reason, and I know this, that there's people that look to me for some sort of inspiration, some sort of guidance, some sort of leadership, whatever that capacity looks like. And so I owe it to people to be honest. Yeah. And part of it, I also know that some of my resume, if you will, is probably creating a story in others' minds that's not accurate to what the real story is. And so I just kind of want to take a no bullshit approach to it. And so, yeah, I feel like taboo stuff is really kind of deadly.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping quiet about things is not working.
Right, because it's the repression.
It's repression, and then you keep it to yourself. You feel ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
You feel the guilt. You feel all of that stuff because you can't then express and be who you are. And that is a recipe for, at a minimum, self-oppression, and very easily escalating to complete self-destruction. And I kind of want to blow the lid off of that. And, that's sort of what drove it.
Yeah.
And the response has been, cool, interesting.
What do you think it is about some of the people that have reached out, like seeing you post that? Like, what do you think it was? I mean, they clearly had insight into the fact that they had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Mm-hmm. What do you think it was about your post that had them say, like, I need to take action to stop this?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, you should probably ask them, but I think part of it was, I think, if I were to say, I think part of it was that I didn't play the victim. Because I refused to be a fucking victim. And I think taking accountability, having self-accountability, is inspiring in a way, and just real. Like, I think it was it was a real post, so I hope people read it as being a real thing. And I just think it was a powerful thing. And I also think that people would have had no idea. Like, there's you know what I mean? Like, I think that...
Yeah, I mean, even within our family and friends, I mean, you were honest, like, I stopped, not drinking. But I don't think anybody was, like, thinking, it's probably...
Well, it's not like I got dinged for a DUI, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And
yeah, I mean, it wasn't like when if we went out or had dinner with people, it's not like, that's my point, too, is even in our relationship, since you've been home, it wasn't like you were blacking out and you couldn't stop drinking, and like, so that's my point, is that stigma of like, well, what it looks like to have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. It's not just looking for people that just get blackout drunk all the time.
No, and I wasn't getting drunk off, like I wasn't, but there was, like, how many times do you need to have one of the darkest experiences of your life?
Okay. Yeah.
Like, what's the minimum requirement to be like, oh, I need to pay attention to that?
So what do you feel like this year, not drinking?
Oh, it's been incredible.
Like, talk about that.
Yeah. So there's part of it that is, I think, it's an opportunity to kind of, for me, personally, to like validate and continue to practice some of the mindset stuff. And my definition of mindset. So having that connection to who you are and honoring it through your actions is like an ability and a daily sort of a practice thing. I think that when it comes to physical health, I think that it's been huge. It's been important. I think that the other thing that it's done is, and there's certainly been hard things like over the past year, of course, but what it's also done is, I don't know if I was still drinking or if I was abusing alcohol, what those hard situations then would have kind of went down into and backslid into.
Right, versus being able to learn from them and grow from them.
So I wish I could say that, like, oh yeah, I'm like running faster and I'm stronger and I'm fucking jumping higher and like that's not it, you know.
Yeah.
But like the absence of it is, I feel it. It's not this monumental thing, but the presence of it would be much graver in that for me, and just that as well as like continuing to have a inward trajectory to working on myself and getting to know myself and really being curious and also compassionate and saying like I'm going to step into this life that I want to live, and I don't know exactly how to, but taking ownership of some of the things in my life that either hinder or facilitate and help, you know, that's been, so I don't know if that answers that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I actually said to a couple of people, I don't know how many people I actually said this to, maybe like 2 or 3, and it was like people who understand dark humor. When I told them I was stopping drinking, they're like, "Oh, why?" And I said, "Well, I'm an avoiding alcoholic." And that's kind of how I started. Like when I first started it, that's how I viewed it. Like I don't know if I would say like I'm an alcoholic. I guess maybe. Yeah, I guess I am or was or whatever. But like, yeah, and again, like I don't really care what the label is. Like that's the whole thing.
But that's the thing. What is an
alcoholic?
Right? What do you have to be an
Yeah,
alcoholic?
like what? Like what's the minute? Like do I have to apply to people?
Yeah.
You know, like if it's like, is it a capital A or is it a lowercase a? Like, is it capital A like alcoholic like a trademark? Like, oh no, you're not an alcoholic until you've gone these steps. And
sure, it's
and
the point is the unhealthy relationship, and that could be with people have unhealthy relationships with a lot of things.
Sure.
This one was alcohol, and what do you do with not everything in life? If you have an unhealthy relationship with food, you can't never eat again. So it looks like a very different recovery process. Yeah. Alcohol, though, you don't need alcohol to live.
No.
So.
Yeah, and I think one of the exercises that I did right when I decided to do this, and I wrote it down and like pen and paper. I made a column, 2 columns. On the one column, the title of that was all the reasons to stop drinking, and I listed out quite a bit. And on the other column was all of the reasons to continue drinking. And I couldn't find a single reason to continue drinking. Like that I could really connect to and believe. Not the bullshit things of like, oh, it's celebration
and this
fun,
and that.
Like,
it tastes good.
Like no,
Yeah.
like no.
I like beer.
Yeah, I like the way it tastes. Not a good like. Yep, right on. But so that was like a very powerful one too. So it's like, okay, so, and what you do with writing and expressing those things is you also see it from a different perspective, and you get it out of your head into a way that you can also walk away from and then come back to.
Yeah.
And when I looked at that list, and I was like, wow, there are quite a few very serious reasons to stop drinking, and I can't come up with like a single legitimate reason.
Right. Like, what do you do with
that
list
drinking.
at that point?
Then why would I continue?
Yeah.
You know, like,
and I think that's the thing. Like, so for you, could you have a cocktail this weekend and then stop drinking again? Sure, but like, what's the point of reintroducing it? Like, there is no point at this point.
I could also have a cigarette. But it doesn't mean I'm gonna do that. Right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a smoker.
Right.
So why the fuck would I have a cigarette? Yeah. Like, I don't want to. I don't.
Right.
So I don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was, but it's been an interesting thing to have that out there. And do I think everybody should stop drinking? No. Yeah. But if you have a problem with it, like, you know.
Right.
You know. And there's a lot of folks out there who, I get it, are really good at rationalizing and justifying, being like, well, it's not a problem. I'm not in a gutter. I didn't get a DUI. I didn't have this tragedy. That's fine. That's all the external as well, though. And the problem is on the internal. And I think that the very dangerous part is that when there is no external proof of the problem, but it's easier to not accept that there is a problem. Yeah. So then the rationalization and the justification comes into the picture. and the story just kind of
Yeah.
you lose control of the story at that point. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you shared that.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's worth also mentioning that one of the reasons why I do what I do and what I would like to do is to continue to be of service and lead within the veteran community.
Yeah.
And there are
There's a man with the package.
I'm just gonna pause on this for a second.
Charlie and Riley. Hey. Awful dogs. This poor man.
Yeah. Anyway, so
One of the reasons you
one of
do
the
what you
reasons
do.
is for to be a voice for the veteran community, and there's a lot of
The veteran community.
the veteran community. Yeah, and there's I know that there's a lot of men and women in this community that feel like they don't have a voice, or haven't found theirs yet, and they need they're on a process and on a journey to find their voice, and sometimes hearing others gives strength, and so that's like a big part of it. There's a few people that I'm thinking about that, yeah, like it kind of keeps me up at night, kind of deal, and to be a leader, and to, if there is a platform, if there is a voice, if there is something, I don't know what it is, and I think that there are folks have said that, like, your writing is powerful, and it's like you're speaking to me, and it resonates, and so to not continue to speak or to put myself out there, because it is personally uncomfortable, and there's a lot of like nasty stuff that I personally deal with this kind of a thing, especially looking at some of my background and what I like. It's no surprise that I wanted to become Green Beret, and our names are the quiet professionals. I'm like, nope, I want to stay in the shadows and do the work. But to give in to the personal discomfort when it's serving others, right, like, then I'm being of disservice to others, and so that is something that still continues to drive me, and my reach is not that big, and I'm good with that, but really the minimum is one. Yeah. And if one person hears it, and whether I know it or not, then I've served. I've done my job. So yeah, that's that.
All right.
Alrighty. Maybe something a little bit lighter next
week.
Speaking of that, if you have, if there's like topics or subjects or questions, sometimes we put up the question thing, but if you want to just send a message or connect or whatever, Instagram is probably the best way, at Bill Anthes, at Cariana Anthes, Cariana with an E, or at Between the Ears. Yeah.
And on the veteran topic, I'm doing a women's retreat for veterans, which is cool.
That's really cool.
And I guess, it's an interesting experience for me. I feel like the women's stuff is something I connect to. I'm not a veteran. I don't pretend to know what that is like. Right. But I'm happy to be someone that can support and knowing.
You're not a veteran, and you know it. That's like one of the biggest things is what I would say is like, your role. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that in like obviously like a fucked up way, but there's a humility with that. Right. And that's something that unfortunately a lot of veterans, where there's a lot of, like, we're used for. I was on a podcast with a big time guy that I think is coming out this week or next week or whatever, and the notion of like PTS and PTSD came up, and it's used often for other motives. Yeah. And that is like an issue. So
and I feel like having been in the role I've been in with you as a spouse of a veteran, having an interesting perspective on that and just trying to serve from that place with a group of women, and which is, I'm sure, unique women veterans.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's not till the fall, but
Yeah,
but if there
that's
are,
gonna be
that's
wild.
through a female veteran that we know well. So that'll be good.
Yeah. Just because you said it, you know, and I'll continue to say this will be the last thing, but like the spouses, you know, and in my experience, because at the time Special Forces was all male, so it was all wives. That's a way harder job than we had.
Different job.
Yeah, of course, different, but like
there's an emotional part of it that's just very different. I think
every good warrior culture knows that the strength of their warriors are the females, and historically that's because, you know, males have been the ones who go to battle. So I'm not being whatever, but like that is where the strength was. Like that is the strength. Yeah, and so that support, you know, and there husbands out there that are not.
Sure, for some of these women,
probably
understanding the point of their husbands if they're not veterans. So understanding both sides, but
yeah.
And to wrap up this topic, yes, that's your experience with alcohol has very much also been my experience.
Yeah.
With your experience with alcohol.
Of course.
So it's not just a singular person.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, that's it. We'll talk to you next week.